The city held its breath. A chill settled over the once vibrant streets. Fear, silent and pervasive, seeped into everyday life. The reason? The midnight criminal. He was a phantom, a whisper in the dead of night. His crimes, audacious and brazen, left the city baffled and the police scrambling. But it wasn't just the crimes themselves, it was the mystery surrounding them. The midnight criminal seemed to vanish into thin air after each act, leaving behind a trail of questions and fear. Who was this shadowy figure and what drove him to terrorize the city? The answers, it seemed, were shrouded in the same darkness that he seemed to command. Every villain, they say, has an origin story, a tale that explains the darkness within, the choices that led them down a path of no return. What then of the midnight criminal? A name whispered in fear, a shadow that haunts the city's darkest corners. What dark path led him to become the city's nightmare? To understand the man behind the mask, we must delve into the shadows of his past. The trail, faint and fragmented, led us back to his childhood, a time when innocence should have been his companion, but instead he found only despair. A childhood marred by poverty, neglect, and a pervasive sense of powerlessness. The streets were his playground, the alleys his refuge. Abandoned by his parents and shuffled through a string of foster homes, he learned to distrust the world and everyone in it. School provided little solace, a battleground where he was outnumbered and outmatched. Bullied relentlessly for his quiet demeanor and shabby clothes, he retreated further into himself, finding solace in the pages of crime novels and the shadowy world of film noir. These stories of anti-heroes and moral ambiguity resonated with him deeply. It was here, perhaps, that the seeds of resentment were sown, taking root in the fertile ground of his anger and isolation. Each story he read, each film he watched, added another layer to his growing discontent. As he grew older, his actions began to mirror the tales he had immersed himself in. Petty crimes at first, a way to assert control over a world that had shown him none. But soon, the stakes grew higher. The thrill of the heist, the rush of outsmarting the authorities, became his new addiction. The midnight criminal was born, a persona crafted from years of pain and a desire for retribution. And so, the city became his playground, a stage for his carefully orchestrated acts of defiance. Each crime a statement, each heist a message to a world that had turned its back on him. The making of a criminal is a complex tapestry of experiences, choices, and circumstances. For the midnight criminal, it was a journey from innocence to infamy, a path paved with the fragments of a broken childhood. The midnight criminal's reign of terror began subtly, petty thefts escalating to vandalism. A string of burglaries, each one bolder than the last, left the city on edge. Then came the turning point, the daring heist at the city museum. He bypassed state-of-the-art security systems, disappearing with a priceless collection of ancient artifacts. The city was stunned. This was no longer the work of a common criminal. This was a calculated act of defiance, a brazen challenge to the authorities. The fear, once a murmur, escalated into a roar. The midnight criminal became a legend, his name whispered in hushed tones, a constant reminder of the city's vulnerability. Section 4. Whispers in the Dark. The investigation begins. Detective John Riley, a seasoned veteran with a reputation for cracking even the toughest cases, was tasked with leading the investigation. The pressure was immense. The city had never seen anything like this before. A series of meticulously planned crimes had left the community in a state of panic. The media was relentless, and the public demanded swift justice. Riley knew that every second counted. The city, gripped by fear and uncertainty, demanded answers. The streets, once bustling with life, now seemed eerily quiet. People hurried home before dark, casting nervous glances over their shoulders. The police presence was heavy, but it did little to ease the collective anxiety. The midnight criminal, as the perpetrator had come to be known, was always one step ahead. Riley, a man of few words and even fewer emotions, approached the case with his trademark methodical precision. He was known for his ability to remain calm under pressure, a trait that had earned him the respect of his peers. His office was a chaotic mess of papers, photos, and notes, but to Riley, it was a carefully organized system. Every piece of evidence had its place, and every clue was a potential key to solving the puzzle. He pored over crime scene photos, scrutinized witness statements, and chased every lead, no matter how insignificant it seemed. Each night, He would revisit the scenes of the crimes, hoping to find something he had missed. He interviewed witnesses multiple times, looking for inconsistencies or new details. His dedication was unwavering, and his determination was fueled by a deep sense of justice. The investigation became an obsession, consuming his every waking moment. Riley's colleagues worried about him, but they knew better than to interfere. He worked late into the night, often falling asleep at his desk. His personal life took a back seat and his health began to suffer. But Riley was relentless. He knew that the midnight criminal was out there, and he was determined to bring him to justice. He knew that the key to catching the midnight criminal lay in understanding his motives. What did he want? Why the elaborate schemes? Why the silence? Riley spent hours analyzing the criminal's behavior, trying to get inside his mind. He knew that understanding the why was just as important as understanding the how. The midnight criminal was meticulous, leaving no trace behind. But Riley was convinced that there was a pattern, a reason behind the madness. The answer, Riley believed, lay buried somewhere in the criminal's past. He delved into old case files, looking for similar patterns or unsolved crimes. He interviewed retired detectives and experts, hoping to find a connection. Every piece of information was a potential clue, and Riley was determined to uncover the truth. He knew that the midnight criminal had a history, and that history held the key to stopping him. He just needed to find it. And when he did, he knew that the pieces of the puzzle would finally fall into place. Riley's eyes burned with determination. The midnight criminal's reign of terror would come to an end, and justice would be served. The investigation was far from over, but Riley was closer than ever to cracking the case. The city slept uneasily, but Riley was wide awake, ready to face whatever came next. Section 5. The Long Shadow of Doubt. Weeks turned into months. The investigation dragged on, each dead end fueling public frustration. The press, relentless in their pursuit of a story, began to question the competence of the police department. Rumors and speculation swirled like wildfire. The midnight criminal took on an almost mythical status, his identity the subject of countless theories and wild guesses. The pressure on Detective Riley and his team intensified. Sleep became a luxury they could ill afford. Every passing day brought them closer to another potential crime, another victim. The weight of the city's safety rested heavily on their shoulders. Failure was not an option. Section 6. A crack in the facade. Just when all hope seemed lost, a breakthrough. The city had been gripped by fear, the midnight criminal's reign of terror seemingly unstoppable. But then a glimmer of hope emerged. A witness came forward, claiming to have seen a man matching the midnight criminal's description fleeing the scene of a recent robbery. This was the first solid lead in weeks. The description was vague, the details hazy, but it was enough for Riley. The detective knew that even the smallest clue could unravel the entire case. It was a lead, a thread in the darkness. Riley meticulously pieced together the fragments of information, hoping to find a pattern, a connection that had been missed before. The witness's account led them to a rundown apartment building on the outskirts of the city. The building stood as a silent witness to the secrets it harbored. The landlord confirmed that a man matching the description had been living there for the past few months. His name, Edward Kane, a name that had not appeared in any of their previous investigations. The apartment itself was sparsely furnished, almost bare. It was as if the occupant had been living a transient life, always ready to move at a moment's notice. The only sign of life was a worn copy of The Count of Monte Cristo lying open on the table. The book seemed out of place in the otherwise empty room. A story of betrayal, imprisonment, and elaborate revenge. The parallels to the midnight criminal's actions were striking. Could this be the key to understanding the midnight criminal's motives? Riley pondered the significance of the book. Was Edward Kane drawing inspiration from its pages? The detective knew that understanding the criminal's mind was crucial to catching him. The investigation had taken a new turn, and Riley was determined to follow it to the end.